And now, just to give you a brief background or introduction about Global Code of Ethics for Tourism, as a fundamental frame of reference for responsible and sustainable tourism, the Global Code of Ethics for Tourism is a comprehensive set of principles designed to guide key players in tourism development.
Addressed to governments, the travel industry, communities, and tourists alike. It aims to help maximize the sector's benefits while minimizing its potentially negative impact on the environment, cultural, heritage, and societies across the globe.
The Global Code of Ethics for Tourism, or the GCET, is a comprehensive set of principles whose purpose is to guide stakeholders in tourism development.
Central and local governments, local communities, the tourism industry and its professionals, as well as visitors, both international and domestic.
Although not legally binding, the code features a voluntary implementation mechanism through its recognition of the role of the World Committee on Tourism Ethics,
to which stakeholders may refer matters concerning the application and interpretation of document.
With international tourism forecast to reach 1.6 billion arrivals by 2020, members of the World Tourism Organization believe that a global code of ethics for tourism is needed to be help minimize the negative impact of the tourism on the environment and on cultural heritage while maximizing the benefits for residents of tourism destination, because it could not only help the flow of the tourism activities but also help the environment to continue improving over the time.
The Global Code of Ethics for Tourism is intended to be a living document. So talking about Global Code of Ethics for Tourism, it has 10 articles, amply cover the economic, social, cultural, and environmental components of travel and tourism.
Article 1, Tourism's contribution to mutual understanding and respect between peoples and society. The understanding and promotion of the ethical values common to humanity, with an attitude of tolerance and respect for the diversity of religious, philosophical, and moral beliefs, are both the foundation and the consequence of responsible tourism. Stakeholders in tourism development and tourists themselves should observe the social and cultural traditions and practices of all peoples, including those minorities and indigenous peoples, and to recognize their worth. Second, tourism activities should be conducted in harmony with attributes and tradition of the host regions and countries and in respect of their laws, practices, and customs. Third, the host communities on the one hand and the local professionals on the other should acquaint themselves with the respect and the tourists who visit them and find out about their lifestyles, tastes, and expectations. The education and training imparted to professionals contribute to a hospitable welcome. Fourth, it is the task of the public authorities to provide protection for tourists and visitors and their belongings. They must pay particular attention to the foreign safety of foreign tourists owing to particular vulnerability they may have. They should facilitate the introduction of specific means of information, prevention, security, insurance, and assistance consistent with their needs. Any attackings, assaults, kidnappings, or threats against tourists or workers in the tourism industry, as well as the willful destructions of tourism facilities or of elements of cultural or natural heritage should be severely condemned and punished accordance with the respective national laws. Fifth, when traveling, tourists and visitors should not commit any criminal act or any act considered criminal by the laws of the country visited and abstain from any conduct felt to be offensive or injurious by the local population or likely to damage the local environment. They should refrain from all trafficking in illicit drugs, arms, antiques, protected species, and products and the substances that are dangerous or prohibited by the national regulations. 6. Tourists and visitors have the responsibility to acquaint themselves, even their departure with the characteristics of the countries they are preparing to visit. They must be aware of the health and security risks inherent in any travel outside their usual environment and behave in such a way as to minimize those risks.
Article 2. Tourism as a vehicle for individual and collective fulfillment. Section 1. Tourism. The activity most frequently associated with the rest and relaxation, sports, and access to culture and nature should be planned and practiced as a privileged means of individual and collective fulfillment. When we say fulfillment, it practiced with sufficiently open mind. It is an irreplaceable factor of a self-education, mutual tolerance, and for learning about the legitimate differences between peoples and cultures and their diversity. Section 2. Tourism activities should be respect the equality of men and women. They should promote human rights, and more particularly, the individual rights of the most vulnerable groups, notably children, the elderly, the handicapped, ethnic minorities, and indigenous people. When it comes to the tourism activities, there is no gender, characteristics, and limitations to be given to those people. It only needs an equal treatment for all. Section 3. The exploitation of human beings in any form, particularly sexual, especially when applied to children, conflicts with fundamental aims of tourism and is the negation of tourism. As such, in accordance with the international law, it should be energetically combated with the cooperation of all states concerned and penalized without concession by the national legislation of both the countries visited and the countries of perpetrators of those acts, even when they carried out abroad. Section 4. Travel for purpose of religion, health, education, and culture or linguistic exchange are particularly beneficial forms of tourism which deserves encouragement. Section 5. The introduction into circula of education about the value of tourist exchange, their economic, social, and cultural benefits, and also their risk should be encouraged.
Tourism, a factor of sustainable development. All the stakeholders in tourism development should safeguard the natural environment with a view to achieving sound, continuous, and sustainable economic growth geared to satisfying equitably the needs and aspirations of present and future generations. All forms of tourism development that are conducive to saving rare and precious resources, in particular water and energy, as well as avoiding so far as possible waste production, should be given priority and encouraged by national, regional, and local public authorities. The struggling in time and space of tourists and visitor flows, particularly those resulting from paid leave and school holidays, and a more even distribution of holidays should be sought so as to reduce the pressure of tourism activity on the environment and enhance its beneficial impact on the tourism industry and local economy. Tourism infrastructure should be designed and tourism activities should be programmed in such a way as to protect the natural heritage composed of ecosystem and biodiversity and to preserve endangered species of wildlife. The stakeholders in tourism development, and especially professionals, should agree to the imposition of limitation or constraints on their activities when these are exercised in particularly sensitive areas like desert, polar or high mountain regions, coastal areas, tropical forests, propitious to the creation of nature reserves or protected areas. Nature tourism and ecotourism are recognized as being particularly conducive to enriching and enhancing the standing of tourism, provided they respect the natural heritage and local population and in keeping with the carrying capacity of the sites.
Article 4. tourism a user of cultural heritage of mankind and contributor to its enhancement. Number 1, tourism resources belong to common heritage of mankind. The communities in whose territories they are situated have particular rights and obligations to them. Number 2, tourism policies and activities should be conducted with respect for the artistic, archaeological, and cultural heritage, which they should protect and pass on to future generations. Particular care should be devoted to preserving and upgrading monuments, shrines, and museums, as well as archaeological and historic sites, which must be widely open to tourist visits. Encouragement should be given to public access to privately owned cultural property and monuments, with respect for the rights of their owners, as well as to religious buildings, without prejudice to normal needs of worship. Third, financial resources derived from visit to cultural sites and monuments should at least in part be used for the upkeep, safeguard, development, and embellishment of this heritage. And the last, tourism activities should be planned in such a way as to allow traditional cultural products, crafts, and folklore to survive and flourish, rather than causing them to degenerate and become standardized.
According to Article 5, tourism, a beneficial activity for hosts, countries, and communities. First, local populations should be associated with tourism activities and share equitably in the economic, social, and cultural benefits they generate, and particularly in the creation of direct and indirect jobs resulting from them. Second, policies should be applied in such a way as to help to raise the standard of living of the populations of the regions visited and meet their needs. The planning and architectural approach to and operation of tourism resorts and accommodation should be aimed to integrate them, to the extent possible, in the local economic and social fabric where skills are equal priority should be given to local manpower. Third, specific attention should be paid to the specific problems of coastal areas and island territories and to vulnerable rural or mountain regions, for which tourism often represents a rare opportunity for development in the face of the decline of traditional economic activities. And lastly, fourth, tourism professionals, particularly investors governed by the regulations laid down by the public authorities, should carry out studies of the impact of their development projects on the environment and natural surroundings. They should also deliver with the greatest transparency and objectivity information on their future programs and their foreseeable repercussions and foster dialogue on their contents with the populations concerned.
Number 8, Article 7, Right to Tourism. Number 1, the prospect of direct and personal access to the discovery and enjoyment of the planet's resources constitutes a right equally open to all the world's inhabitants. The increasingly extensive participation in national and international tourism should be regarded as one of the best possible expressions of the sustained growth of free time, and obstacles should not be placed in its way. Number 2, the universal right to tourism must be regarded as the corollary of the right to rest and leisure, including reasonable limitation of working hours and periodic holidays with pay. Guaranteed by Article 24, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and Article 7d of the International Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. 3. Social tourism, and in particular associative tourism, which facilitate with the spread access to leisure, travel, and holidays, should be developed and the support of the public authorities. 4. The last one is family, youth, student, and seniors tourism, and tourism for people with disabilities should be encouraged and facilitated.
Article 8, Liberty of Tourist Movements. First, tourists and visitors should benefit in compliance with international law and national legislation from the liberty to move within their countries and from one state to another. In accordance with Article 13 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, they should have access to place of transit and stay to tourism and cultural sites without being subject to excessive formalities or discrimination. Second, tourists and visitors should have access to all available forms of communication, internal or external. They should benefit from prompt and easy access to local, administrative, legal, and health services. They should be free to contact consular representative of their countries of origin in compliance with the diplomatic convention in force. Third, tourists and visitors should benefit from the same rights as the citizen of the country visited, considering the confidentiality of the personal data and information considering them, especially when these are stored electronically. Fourth, administrative procedure relating to border crossing, whether they fall within the compliance of state or result from international agreement, such as visas or health and custom formalities, should be adopted so far as possible. So, to facilitate the maximum freedom of travel, widespread access to international tourism, agreements between groups of countries to harmonize and specify these procedures should be engaged. Specifically, taxes and levies penalizing the tourism industry and undermining its competitiveness should be gradually phased out or corrected. And lastly, so far as the economic situation of the country from which they come permits, travelers should have access to allowance of convertible currencies needed for their travels.
Next we have is the Article 9, which is the rights of the workers and entrepreneurs in the tourism industry. Number 1. The fundamental rights of salaried and self-employed workers in the tourism industry and related activities should be guaranteed under the supervision of their national and local administrations, both of their states of origin and of the host country, with particular care. Given the specific constraints linked in particular to the seasonality of their activity, the global dimension of their industry, and the flexibility often required of them by the nature of their work. Number 2. Salaried and self-employed workers in the tourism industry and related activities have the right and the duty to acquire appropriate initial and continuous training. They should be given adequate social protection. Job insecurity should be limited so far as possible, and a specific status with particular regard to their social welfare should be offered to seasonal workers in the sector. Number 3. Any natural or legal person, provided he, she, or it has the necessary abilities and skills, should be entitled to develop a professional activity in the field of tourism under existing national laws. Entrepreneurs and investors, especially in the area of small and medium-sized enterprises, should be entitled to free access to the tourism sector with a minimum of legal or administrative restrictions. Number 4. Exchanges of experience offered to executives and workers, whether salaried or not, from different countries contributes to the fostered development of the world tourism industry. These movements should be facilitated so far as possible in compliance with the applicable national laws and international conventions. Number 5. As an irreplaceable factor of solidarity in the development and dynamic growth of international exchanges, multinational enterprises of the tourism industry should not exploit the dominant positions they sometimes occupy. They should avoid becoming the vehicles of cultural and social models artificially imposed on the host communities in exchange for their freedom to invest and trade, which should be fully recognized. They should involve themselves in local development, avoiding by the excessive repatriation of their profits or their induced imports, a reduction of their contribution to the economies in which they are established. Lastly, partnership and the establishment of balanced relations between enterprises of generating and receiving countries contribute to the sustainable development of tourism and an equitable distribution of the benefits of its growth.
According to Article 10, implementation of principles of the Global Codes of Ethics for Tourism. First, the public and private stakeholders in tourism development should cooperate in the implementation of these principles and monitor their effective application. Second, the stakeholders in tourism development should recognize the role of international institutions, among which the World Tourism Organization ranks first, and non-governmental organizations with competence in the field of tourism promotion and development. The protection of human rights, the environment of wealth, with due respect for the general principles of international law. Third, the same stakeholders should demonstrate their intention to refer any disputes concerning the application or interpretation of the Global Code of Ethics for Tourism for conciliation to an impartial third body known as the World Committee on Tourism Ethics.
Maraming salamat! Choose Tourism, choose UE Manila!
I got my head out the sunroof, I'm blasting our favorite tune.